Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Player 2 podcast. I'm your co-host, Rade Strojsavljevic.
And I'm your co-host, Dave Leary. I'm recovering a little bit from a flu, so my voice may be off today. I may hack in your ear, Roddy, but I am pleased to remind you that this is our 20th podcast.
Wow, 20 already. I shall rename the title because I put episode 19 on this one because
You've had it off by one every time you've done it, but then when I do the edit, I fix it. So
I've fixed it now.
I just do this invisibly behind the scenes for you, Roddy. It's what I do.
I love it. This is an awesome collaboration. All right. So before we get into it, lots of stuff to talk about this week. Want to remind everyone, please hit the like or subscribe button for us. It helps us out on whatever platform you're listening to or watching this. All right. So let's start with the big one. Epic announced layoffs across the company, 1,000 people, which, just talk about kicking people while they're down. That just sucks.
Yeah, and boy, I know we hate to lead off with the layoffs, but this is a pretty huge one, and it's coming obviously as Fortnite and its giant business begins to soften a little bit over the years as businesses do. I think Epic's announcement about it was fairly as reasonable as one can be about these layoff announcements. You certainly do still hate to see it, and you wonder why they were not able to mitigate this a little better with the revenue stream they have.
So we'll get into that a little bit more in the main section of this episode, but I kind of wanted to lead with that because it is the biggest news of the week. So table that, get back to that a little bit. A couple other interesting things. We talked before about how AI-driven data centers are consuming chips and driving up prices and how that's going to affect prices of consoles, what it might do to Steam Machine. We still don't have a launch date for that or the Steam frame, but like I think I mentioned in one of the previous episodes, maybe they hedged and bought memory. That's not what I heard. They're running into the same shortage and cost crunch as everyone else. So we'll see what that does for the device. I would not be surprised if that got pushed out to 2027. I don't know if it will, but we'll see.
So what's your thinking there? Why are you expecting the push?
So I thought it was just a cost thing that was going to drive up cost of components. But what I'm hearing more and more talking to my hardware people is there's just an outright shortage as well. It's just harder to get the hardware that you need to build these things. And I don't know if that mitigates anytime soon. And so like if you just can't get the components, it just doesn't make sense to launch a new device. If you can't make numbers, you really piss off your customers. Usually with these consoles, you would see artificial scarcity to kind of drive up word of mouth. I mean, lines around the block when we used to try to get the Switch or something like that. But then the devices show up for when you need them. And if you don't have product to sell, people just get mad and they'll move on to something else. And then you've just destroyed your launch. So you got to be careful.
And there's not a massive clamoring for this right now. I think it's anticipated, but I don't feel like the market is itching to jump right into this, and there's tons of consumers lining up to grab it.
No, I mean, we already saw price was affecting demand. Nintendo revised down their forecast for Switch 2 because of costs. Could also be recessionary pressure. People just have less cash in their pocket that they're willing to spend on a new device. Could be cost of device. Sony just announced they're increasing for the second time the price of the PlayStation, which, if you've ever followed how these consoles go, they're supposed to get cheaper the older they get, not more expensive. So this is weird.
Yeah, I mean, I saw those PlayStation prices, and I guess they're talking about a PlayStation Pro coming in at $900 now. I can't really see getting a lot of customers who don't already have a PlayStation in at that price point.
Yeah, usually what you have in the life cycle of the console is they do revisions on the hardware to drive down the cost of production. Price comes down, your audience widens. And that's how you get to, the kind of growth that we've historically seen over the past 5-6 console generations. That's not happening now. And so we'll have to see what happens, how that plays out in the market. But I cannot imagine it's going to do anything good for audience expansion. It should either slow or shrink even.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you on that. I kind of have actually held off buying a PlayStation. I have a current generation Xbox, but I certainly am not going to buy one at that price when I have so many other gaming options right now and good ones.
So the good news on this front is if this is all driven by demand for AI data centers, Google has a piece of tech they just announced called TurboQuant, which dramatically reduces the memory required to run many of these large language models by a factor of 6 without really affecting quality. And we could get into the details about how you quantize an LLM and how you like there's good and bad. Like this is a new approach that doesn't have the bad, but just shrinks the memory footprint of it. So it should reduce demand, could also increase more data centers. So there's just more being done. So it may not do anything, but like from a technology standpoint, it's interesting. And I think it's probably good.
Yeah, I mean that's exciting stuff. That's certainly one of the holy grail problems to solve for the AI business. I do still wonder, and I think we have another topic we could talk about a little bit. Do still wonder if parts of the AI bubble are in the process of bursting right now, but maybe
Yeah.
that'll help too.
Yeah, I mean, we just saw OpenAI is dumping Sora. I like the partnership with Disney for that thing is dissolved or is dissolving, and like I saw some reports that it was costing them $1 million a day to keep that thing up and running. And so, like my hypothesis when I first heard this was, oh man, like this thing is just way more expensive to run, and they're not able to monetize it. And so that's probably partially true. I think the other thing is like the rate of improvement for these models means they just weren't as competitive as some of the others out there. Maybe a little bit of both.
Yeah, I think you're right. I read some of the same stuff you did. They were bleeding cash and losing users over after an initial jump in user base right at the beginning. They had really started to bleed out. I think they caught Disney a little off guard, from my understanding. I mean, Disney had signed a $1 billion deal with them, and that's a pretty major deal for Disney. I think everyone was surprised when that deal even happened. Business perspective, I think if you're OpenAI and you're facing increased competition from Anthropic and you're burning cash on a bunch of different fronts, it makes sense to simplify your business and winnow down to the stuff that might actually have a shot at making some cash one day.
Yeah, and this whole thing kind of just underscores something that we found out when we were looking at AI tech for our previous company is this stuff is moving so fast. It's really a bad idea if you're doing anything with AI for your development, even if it's just prototyping and you're not putting anything into your final product, to tie yourself down to one particular technology. Like this is not like a game engine where you start the product with one game engine in mind, swap that out in the middle. I know teams that have done that. It is never good. And you could, if you find some old timers who have done that, they'll bend your ear and spin yarns of some crazy shenanigans there. But like you should plan on swapping out your AI tech every 3 months, maybe every 6 at most. It just moves that quickly.
Yeah, at a minimum. I mean, being platform agnostic and model agnostic is, I think, going to be the future going forward. I feel like we learned that last year. I think a lot of other companies are in the process of learning that now. And that's dangerous for a company like OpenAI.
It is. Let's talk about one more thing in the news. I heard an interesting rumor that GTA 6 development cost is between 2.1 and 3 billion with a B dollars.
Boy, that's a whole big pile of cash, isn't it? Think if you run the numbers. I was running the numbers after you told me that stat, and I think they can make it back. I'm pretty sure they can, but that's a pretty ridiculous. That's like Avatar movie numbers. That's the kind of budgets you're talking about here now.
Yeah, I mean this I used to joke that building a massively multiplayer game tended to bankrupt studios just because they were so expensive to build. Man, those look cheap by comparison if that estimate is true for GTA.
I mean, I think we're going to see a lot of that money in the product. I do expect it will be polished. I expect it'll be up to Rockstar standards, but it's hard for me to imagine a game costing that much. And it makes me think that $80 price point that they've been talking about for the base SKU is probably the minimum they need to charge for it if that's what they're really investing in it.
Yeah, I would say the other takeaway from this is if those figures are actually true, nobody should try to build a open world game like that and try to catch them because you're not going to catch the 20-year lead that they've got in terms of tools, know-how, and technology to build something like that. That would just be insane.
I think that's fair, though I know we are going to talk a little later and revisit Crimson Desert, which was made for a cheap $130 million. By comparison, there may be some spaces there. I agree with you. I don't think anyone should try to directly compete with Rockstar in that space, but there's still some room for games to exist on the outside of the $2 to $3 billion budget.
For sure. I'm not saying don't go build an open world game. I'm just saying don't build that open world game. I think they will, like, you have no chance. That would be like me going up to Mike Tyson in his prime and say, come on, come at me, bro.
Yeah.
I would get flattened in a second.
Yeah, I would not ever bet against Rockstar or try to directly compete with Rockstar in exactly the space that they're in. They are still masters of what they do.
All right, let's get into some detail about Fortnite and Epic, because I think what's probably going to wind up being a hot take on this, and I got to figure out how to phrase this in a way that it doesn't get taken out of context. So here goes. I'll try it all in one go so you don't chop this up and make me look like a fool. With all due respect to the people that were laid off at Epic, which absolutely sucks, I think net, this is probably a good thing for the industry that Fortnite is in decline. And the reason I say that is we've seen indications that the users were shrinking away from the product, possibly 30% year over year is one forecast that I saw. And games like Fortnite are so sticky, they just take attention away from core cohorts that might be spreading out their revenue and probably more revenue across more titles outside of the industry. Like, at some point, these big projects, these big service games add so many people that, like, almost all the money was made from the core people that built the game and the core product that's out there. And now you have all this cost that starts piling on to operate it. And they're adding minimal incremental revenue. Like, I'm not trying to diminish anyone's work on Fortnite after launch, far from it. I'm just saying, maybe you increased revenue by 50 million a year, which sounds like a lot of money, but when you're at $1 billion plus product, like, it's small, and that money could probably have employed more people elsewhere that just don't have those costs and kept more products going and giving more things a shot at going big. So yeah, hot take on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with anything you just said. I think that if there is a discussion topic I think we're having here, it has to be about the long-term impact of Fortnite on both the game industry and the culture. And I think that's kind of what you're alluding to. I have to pull out a confession time for you, Roddy. This is an absolute crime as a game developer, I know, but I have never actually played Fortnite. I certainly have followed it. I know it's been a juggernaut since its 2017 launch. It frankly wasn't for me, but I can't deny the impact it's had. I mean, it's a huge esports space. It's been parodied by mass market media. Celebrities have jumped in. There have been concerts in Fortnite over the years. There have been massive cultural events that have happened in Fortnite. It occupies a space that I think the only other game I can think of that maybe comes close is something like Minecraft. I think that what they bought with their years of work on Fortnite was something that kind of will resonate for a while, even as the game itself begins to decline.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I don't know just kind of prognosticating what could happen. I don't know for sure which of these paths it's going to go down. I think the least probable outcome for the game is something changes and they return to a growth phase. I think that's just highly unlikely. You just generally don't see that with a lot of products, even though that is the story of original Fortnite when they did their pivot. But that was something else. I don't know if the decline accelerates. I think that's a more likely outcome, but probably not the one that we land at. I think it's just a question of what does year over year look like and how do you manage that decline? And that's kind of what you see in a lot of live service products, particularly in mobile. You reach your peak at some point, and then you try to get the smoothest glide slope possible. And then at some point you shut it down. In terms of like trying to give some insider info, which I do not have insider info into why they decided now was the time to do a layoff like that. Your lack of growth or your decline is not a surprise to anyone at Epic who is looking at those metrics. I think you try to give yourself enough runway to see if you could bend that curve and recover it. And they probably just I don't see any shocks that happen that said, oh my God, we have to do this right now. We're in crisis. I think they just literally were watching this. We're trying to see if they could make it better and then set a timeline for when they could reasonably do that. And it didn't. And so that's why they chose to do it now versus, maybe a smaller layoff 6 months ago or something like that.
Is Fortnite 2 a logical play for them, or would that just be a disaster?
It is historically extremely difficult, and there are very, very, very few examples of a game like that that was able to take their community from one product to another and have any kind of success with the new things. Like if you think about it from a psychological standpoint, you've invested all this time in your community and everything else, and you now have to make a decision of if you want to make that investment again in the new thing or something else. And more often than not, most players are like, yeah, this now's a good point to put that down. That phase of my life is over. I'm going to try something else. That's why I don't know if it's that or just a different product.
Is this, you and I have talked a little bit about this fairly recently. We kind of talked about the rebirth of the game industry and how the products that are going to get made will shift. Is this just another coffin nail in the coffin of big live service games?
I don't think live service games go away. I just don't know if they need to be that big anymore.
Yeah, do customers even want something at that scale, or do they want, a smaller friend slop experience or something that they can go spend time in that's a single player game?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, like, this is not Minecraft, or sorry, this is closer to Minecraft than it is to Fortnite. Fortnite, Roblox. Roblox is not a game. Roblox is a platform that has a bunch of different games in there. And the power of that one is, like, you get tired of the thing you're in, and then there's 50 new things to choose from a day, or more frequently than that. You'll find something that you like. So that's just a volume type of play to simplify it a lot. I don't know if we see another game quite like Fortnite. It might be GTA. We saw that with the last GTA. I could see this, like, I know there's elements of this here. I don't think they're going to go to the same degree of UGC that Fortnite did, but I don't know. Could be a lot of the people go over there.
Fortnite was almost making a play for that kind of Roblox space, right? They had their Fortnite Islands and the Fortnite developer program. I know some developers who actually made a little money there, though the payouts and as a platform, it was not particularly favorable to developers.
Yeah, I mean, that's the challenge. I mean, devs are going to go where they could get their product in front of customers. And there's actually, like, if you can keep your costs low enough, there's a business on Roblox. I just don't know if enough people made a business out of it on Fortnite for it to make sense.
Yeah, my sense is that they did not. The few people I know that were in that, did a couple of things and then pretty quickly got out. It did not end up being something that they could sustain. If I were betting, I would probably bet on a Roblox thing before I bet on a Fortnite Islands thing, particularly now, given the latest.
What I hope happens and comes out of all of this is there's just so much great original content out there that's just not getting the play hours that I think it deserves, because just people are just, all their time is being sucked up in these other big live service games. I hope, the generation of players that grew up and spent most of their gaming time in Fortnite gets to see some of that stuff and sees the world of just awesome content that they could explore.
Yeah, I mean, this is an opportunity for somebody whose only game has been Fortnite to kind of come join the rest of us in the pool of all the great games that are out there. So I would encourage all my Fortnite kiddos that have been playing Fortnite for years and years and years to come try some other stuff, because there's cool stuff out there.
Yeah. I just want to be really clear about one thing. Like, I am not celebrating the shrinking or the demise of Fortnite at all. Like, this is not me saying that. I'm just looking at the potential good for the rest of the industry that could come out of this product, kind of moving past its peak and moving into its golden years. I don't know what the right term for this is.
I mean, everything has its day. Fortnite's been hugely successful since its launch, and that was 2017. So I think any game that has a 7, 8, 9-year run at the top of the game, as they clearly have had, take the accolades that they're due, and respect the history of the product, and think about what's next for the team that's left at Epic.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this with film and TV. Franchises that they came out with a bang. Some of them ended really, really strong. Some of them went on longer than they should have. I know how I would want to go out with one of those IPs. I point to Breaking Bad as, like, I want to do that. I don't want to do what the recent reincarnation of Star Trek is, with just the sheer amount of garbage content that's being put out with that franchise. just hurts me to my soul. But that's a separate topic. We don't need to get in on that now.
We need a whole Star Trek episode so I can show off my Captain Kirk Hot Wheels van and other things.
Dude, so. There's an interesting interview recently between the guy behind Project Hail Mary and talking about Star Trek. If you haven't seen his interview, it's pretty good.
Excellent. I heard there was a little back and forth, a little sniping from Star Trek creators back and forth with the Project Hail Mary guy.
Apparently he submitted some stuff, got rejected, and he's a pretty good hot take on it. But I mean, you could back it up. The guy's written some great sci-fi. He's got two big hits. Yeah. Like to see something from that guy again.
So pour one out for Fortnite this week and respect its cultural impact and hope that their fans find another home after Fortnite finally winds down.
Yeah, and you think that home is probably Crimson Desert, don't you?
So that is going to get into our game of the week, which is the same as our game of last week. So we need to revisit our bet. I'm actually not going to talk about the game too much this week. I'm going to talk about things related to the game. I'm going to wait. I'm assuming you have not played it yet because you're either going to wait for a sale or you're going to wait to see how things go.
I think I know how things are going. I'm going to wind up playing it. I am cheap, so I am going to wait for a sale on that, or maybe I'll bite the bullet. But like, I've got a vacation coming up soon. I'm not going to pick it up before that. It'll be sometime mid-April in the earliest that I'm going to play it.
Well, revisiting our bet was 3 weeks in the top 3, correct?
Yes.
So if I get to count the pre-order week of March 10th, I don't know if you're going to let me get away with that.
No, it's got to be from launch.
Okay, from launch. Okay, so I still have a couple weeks to go before we can resolve the bet. But I will say after the first week, they are sitting at 3 million copies sold. And in addition to our bet, you said a couple of things last week that I want to call you out on directly. You said that you thought it was going to flame out quickly and that it seemed like the previews were pushing visual fidelity, which made you concerned that the gameplay would be a little thin. And so I want to give you the opportunity to do what some professional reviewers after this game came out seem to be incapable of this week, and perhaps reframe your take a little bit if you like before we get into some topic here.
All right. So look, I've worked with people that had nasty habits of doubling down on their own mistakes. I am not going to do that. I'm going to admit that I was surprised to see review scores going up after launch and consistently going up. That's extremely rare. You just generally don't see that. And I think it all comes back to I did not put enough weight into the fact that really the game at its surface level does not look like a good product. It does not play like a good product, and that you have to invest 10 plus hours before you get into that. And I think my mistake here was I did not give gamers enough credit and think they would have the patience to do that. I don't know if it's because I've been working on a mobile title lately and it's like attention span and metrics are measured in minutes, or if I just had a cynical take on that. A lot of people just proved me wrong on that and are spending enough time to get to the good parts of the game. And once they finally get to that, they're actually enjoying the product. And so I did not have faith.
I respect your retcon and reframing. I think that you took a look at this pretty honestly. And in fact, that's kind of exactly what I wanted to talk about was some of the discourse around this product's launch. You know, the Metacritic aggregate on this game started out in the high 70s. It's stayed there because Metacritic doesn't move very quickly. Company stock as a result dropped 40% on day one. And the initial drop of Steam user reviews were really poor. I mean, this game was rocking at about 55, 56% mixed ratings on Steam on day one. Especially notable, and I want to talk about this one a little bit specifically, was the IGN review, which scored this as a 6 out of 10. But then something curious happened, and you've kind of alluded to this. Players stuck with this, and they started to have fun. This was my experience exactly. I struggled with the controls for the first few hours. I was horribly sick, so I wasn't actually very engaged. And then something clicked for me. And I'm now seeing something I've never seen before. I checked the user scores on Steam this morning, and from that initial 56%, it's now at 85%. This morning. Yeah. And that is an insane turnaround. I can never, ever remember seeing a game turn around that fast. Not surprisingly, the stock price has recovered too. You know, reviews are subjective, And I get that and I acknowledge it. But I feel like a lot of the professional reviewers and IGN in particular approach this game with such an outdated evaluation framework and just the wrong comps for it. And it's been kind of interesting to me to watch some of that traditional gaming press continue to double down on negativity in the follow-up articles. I think that's something we got to think about as an industry is, where does that kind of narrative come from? How does that happen? And why does it happen so quickly that a company's stock then has to plummet and a game doesn't have time to find an audience like Crimson Desert is clearly finding?
So I'll quickly table the stock question. People are fickle. I mean, like, especially investors. Like you saw this when Google released that video of their AI driven GTA style game, and like all of a sudden, like Unity stock is down, game stocks are down from that, and then anyone who was in the industry looked at that, it's like, man, this is all smoke and mirrors nonsense. And it was pretty clear that like that was no path to ever get to a game. In fact, there's now articles, I just read one today about how, like, why is AI so bad at making games? So that's one thing. I think at least for me, what I didn't anticipate, and I like one of these things I should have looked at. The second, I don't think there was any way of forecasting it. There's not a lot of competition for that product right now in the market. Like if that had launched against other big titles, I think I probably would have been right that no one would have invested the time because their attention would have just gone to something else. That's not the case here. I should have seen that. I didn't. The other thing is that I think there might be a bit of a cultural aspect going on right now. So I'm going to go way back to when Dark Souls launched. That game is notoriously difficult and hardcore. And like you look at that and you're like, man, why did that do so well? Great game, but it's just like brutally difficult game. It launched amidst a backlash of casual games where there was talk about how mobile was killing everything and like casual games are king and free to play is the way to go and all that stuff. And I think in this is a gross simplification, but I think there's a cultural aspect of that, of gamers giving an FU the pundits. You're like, no, we love this stuff. And to back to your point about the reviews and does it matter and everything, this might be the same thing where there's a bit of a backlash of like, no, man, we like the kind of games where you have to go discover how to do things. We don't like being handheld. Like you must play it this way. I want to play it the way I want to play it. I want to discover the cool stuff on it. And oh, look, this product actually delivers that. So maybe there's an element to that going on here. And I don't think anyone could have foreseen that.
I think that's right. I think that is part of the appeal of this game. I think also the devs have frankly kind of done everything right since launch. They have been incredibly responsive, so that always buys you some goodwill with the gamer community. They have released 2 patches, pretty substantial patches, which are chock full of basically everything the community has asked for. In fact, if I were to have any concern as a developer, it's that they're almost too aggressively reacting to what the fans say they want and perhaps undermining a bit of what makes the game special in the process. And maybe they ought to take a little break and let the fan base settle before they continue to make it easier and more smoothed out. But I will say this too, I feel like this is exactly the kind of product that you and I have been talking about that gamers should be rooting for. It feels fresh and exciting. It's got great moment-to-moment experience filled with beautiful distractions, and the exploration is the best I've ever seen. It's a new product. It's a new IP. Even though I know there's a Black Desert Online that it's related to, it's going to feel like a new IP to a lot of gamers coming to it. And I think if I'm working on the next Elder Scrolls game or the next in a long line of Ubisoft open world games, and I'm not looking at what this product is doing and why it's engaging gamers, I think I'm making a pretty big mistake. So in the end, I look forward to you playing it. And I think maybe we need to even do a third session on this after you do play it, but you're going to have a rough time for the first 6 hours. I'm not going to lie to you.
Yeah, this has moved from a product that I was going to look at as kind of like lessons on go-to-market and positioning and things to now this is a must-play game of the year for me. Not because I think I'm going to love it, but like there are games that you see every year that like I have to play this because it's going to change the way we're going to do things going forward. And I suspect this is going to be that.
Yeah, that's where I'm at as well. And I'm glad to hear you've come around to the light, Roddy. And I will endeavor to model you. And if I get something wrong, which is rare and doesn't actually happen, then I will admit that I have gotten something wrong in the same gracious way that you have here today.
I don't know if I told the audience this, but if I lose the $1 bet, which I likely will, I will pay you with a dollar bill that has the signature of our current president on it when those arrive.
That is excellent. I have a stamped thing I can put right under that signature that will make that dollar bill extra special.
Yeah, as much as I'm going to own up on my mistake, I'll still pay my bet with a spite dollar.
Okay.
If I can.
Fair enough.
All right.
Fair enough.
All right. So I think that takes us to the end of another I think it's a great episode of the Player 2 podcast. I'm glad you're feeling better, David.
Hey, episode 22. I feel like that's a good milestone. We just, that's good. We did.
It is excellent. Yep.
A lot of content, as the kids say these days.
Hey, if you're watching this, it's going to be a little bit late on the post because we did not record the week before because of Dave's illness.
Yes. But we will try to get this up very soon.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Later.
All right.